The 1,000-year blood war has officially begun, and it clearly isn't going to be letting up anytime soon, as I've now read up through chapter 488 and seen episode 2 of the anime, and yeah, this is definitely a war. So let's get into it, because as maybe one of the biggest Hollow and Arrancars fans on the internet, I was in some ways very happy, but in more ways, very worried for them. I talked a bit last video about my hopes that this story arc would live up to its title, and that this would feel like a large-scale conflict, and it already isn't disappointing in that regard. The simultaneous attack on Ichigo and the Soul Society was a great opening to like the match, but that only dovetails into learning that this war is even more expansive than I thought. The reintroduction of Hueco Mundo and what's going on there helps broaden this problem and give it this universal scale where it's clear after seeing Ebern in the living world, the invaders in Yamamoto's office, and now Quincy raiding parties in Hueco Mundo, that this new threat is a threat to everyone. So first, let's get into the aftermath of everything that happened last time. We left off with the introduction of the mustached man that seems to be the new big bad. The anime's first scene referred to him as the Quincy King, and the subtitles for the anime in this past episode I watched showed this as his name. Some of you lovely patrons during my reactions there have tried to lay out how to pronounce it for me, but I'm not going to even attempt until I hear it first, because my first few tries ended with me calling him a Star Wars space bear. Ewok? But yeah, this new baddie, this mustachioed menace, however you say his name, is already proving to be a really intimidating new threat, with somewhat of an interesting dichotomy between his words and his action. He talks about making a foundation for peace, while he enacts some really sudden and unnecessary violence on his own men, which doesn't seem very peaceful, but I suppose he's an ends justify whatever means kind of guy. But the abruptness of how he ended both Ludus and even Ebern really caught me off guard. His reasoning for first killing Ludus especially was kinda wild, because Ludus had talked about planning ahead, and our Quincy King suddenly was like, "You're talking so much about the future. Are you a prophet?" He apparently prefers to focus on the present, and killed Ludus for daring to consider tomorrow. That's pretty extreme. He's just like, don't you dare put anything on your schedule. Live in the moment. I'd hate to ask him if he wants to hang out this weekend, because he'll be like, why are you thinking about the weekend? It's Wednesday, and then I'll just get killed, I guess. Then he killed Ebern too for essentially being mid. He's like, you didn't do anything wrong, but you didn't do anything particularly right either. Then bam, he's gone too. Kind of hilarious, but mostly unsettling with just how easily he discarded them. And one of his subordinates brought up how Ichigo's Bankai wasn't captured, and that word in particular stood out to me, because before they were saying the Bankais would disappear, but capture to me implies that their ritual doesn't just neutralize or get rid of Bankai, but maybe takes it and stores it. The question is, once they have it, can they use it? Will we see these Bankais turned against their former wielders? That could be wild. I'd like to see that. Back in the living world, after driving Ebern away, Ichigo gets back to his somewhat worried friend group, but not before Orihime points out how good of friends Ichigo and Uryu have become, and this continues to set off my red flags. I'm like 80% sure about Uryu being set up to turn on his friends in favor of the Quincy's, which I discussed a bit last video, that now is a potential possibility, and everything here is just giving me more reason to believe that. Orihime reinforcing how much has changed, and Uryu is a true friend to Ichigo, seems intentionally designed to set up him betraying that friendship, to make it hit more by pointing it out beforehand. Because yes, they have grown a lot as friends since Uryu's first appearance, but that seems to be going directly towards a natural conflict with the Quincy's back, but we'll see. We get a report of the infiltration of the Soul Society, and it's much worse than I initially believed, because the focus was mostly on Yamamoto's office that we saw. We were kind of left blind to any other damage, outside of, his lieutenant being, like, javelined into the room. And the actual attack was insane. They talk about how within, like, 3 minutes, over 100 Soul Reapers were killed, that hit me hard. That these people could do that much damage, and with them being able to slip in undetected, it makes it even scarier. Like, we've got a real big issue with these people as our enemies. And yes, we unfortunately do get confirmation that Yamamoto's lieutenant, Chojuro Sasakabe, did indeed die from the wounds he sustained. And I do feel a little bad about it. I gave him a lot of flack during my recent updated lieutenant ranking, talking about how he didn't come to contribute to the Karakura Town fight, how he has barely left any impression on me. And last video I said that if anyone had to die, maybe it should be the guy that hasn't done anything. And now, after his death, I've got Byakuya saying all these really awesome things about Chojuro, how he could have become a captain if he wanted to, but refused because he was loyal to being Yamamoto's second, or how the one and only time he ever used his Bankai was just before he died. I hope it was a cool Bankai for him to wait that long to use it. I'm kinda sad we didn't see it, but if I'm right about the Vandenreich stealing Bankais, maybe they'll be able to use it and we'll be able to see it. But yeah, we get all of this information about him after he dies, and it all sounds super respectable and super badass. It's like Kubo was specifically preemptively telling me off, and here's the moment when the guilt really started to set in during my reading, when I realized that I may have misjudged Chojuro, and Kubo was making sure I was aware of my mistake. Here is that exact moment for me. Some would insult him as an assistant captain who did not take part in battle and treated him just like another seated officer. I'm sorry, Kubo! That's exactly what I did. I'm sorry. So yeah, I've got to apologize to Chojuro. You were much more of a real one than I gave you credit for, but I do wish I got to see some of that before you died, but I guess there's a lesson there. Sometimes you don't know what you got till it's gone. The funeral was a powerful moment as well. I don't think we've seen a Soul Reaper funeral before, or at least I don't remember one right now, but I especially liked how it showed how his death is hitting Yamamoto. The head captain has been kind of this unshakable, stoic kind of character throughout Bleach, sometimes to a fault, but now he's been hit in a very personal spot, so I'm curious to see him deal with this. He's obviously pretty pissed, and I hope that him being pissed will lead to him burning a lot of bad guys or unleashing, some supernova Bankai. Although, maybe the Quincy's could steal that, I don't know. We also had Mayuri informing the other captains that their new enemies are Quincy's, so now the rest of the characters are catching up to what we have already discovered, which is good, but I do think Mayuri should be worried though. Considering how much he bragged about what he did to the Quincy's, if they've got a bone to pick with anyone, it's probably him. Maybe this will be the part of Bleach where he finally gets his comeuppance for being so twisted. I love the guy as a character. Like, he's so much fun, one of the most entertaining characters, but it's not like he doesn't deserve to get a beat down for the things that he's done. I'd kind of love to see those issues brought back up, considering how much I loved his fight with Uryu way back. Mayuri should be worried. He tortured, he experimented, he tormented, he contributed to like a near extinction. He should be scared. And I feel like it's gonna really come back to bite him. A little side note, but I loved how the anime depicted Ichigo and the others finding out about the attack. There was just this minute of screen time of all of them contemplating in silence as this montage went by, with this beautifully sad music as they all went about their days, knowing something awful was happening in the Soul Society. It was just really well done in the anime. I liked that a lot. I was really surprised, but really happy when Nell came falling from the sky. She was such a great character during the Arrancars arc, and didn't really have a clear resolution by the end of that, so I've been hoping we'd see her and the other surviving Arrancars at some point, but I wish it was under better circumstances. I guess I should be more careful what I wish for, because yes, they're back, including my boy Pesce, who may be the funniest character in all of Bleach in my opinion, but the cost of their return is that it's because they're going through something horrible. We learned that Hueco Mundo fell to the Vandenreich when they invaded, and that Harabel has been taken prisoner. Thanks to your guys' suggestions a few months ago, I did read the Nestle Tonight story back then that explained Harabel's survival after the Karakura battle, and her ascension to become ruler of Hueco Mundo in Aizen and the late great King Bargain's absence. I'm really glad I did that, cause damn, I would have been surprised she's still alive if I hadn't. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like her reign went very well, but it's not like she could have predicted that the Quincy's of all people were gonna come back. You can't really prepare for something that literally seems impossible. But honestly, the King Bargain fanboy in me wants to say he could have done better. But frankly, I don't think any of the Arrancars could have stopped this from happening. The Quincy's just seem way too overwhelming considering what they've done to Hueco Mundo. And we only hear about what happened to the Hueco Mundo homeland during the invasion in the manga, but we actually get a glimpse of that attack in the anime. And it was a chilling scene to see Harabel like that, beaten as she's facing this like oncoming storm. And the Quincy King in this scene hovering around like that over his troops reminded me of a much more terrifying Iron Man. It was just a fun little addition that drove those past events home a little more. Like, it was effective to really see, like, the fear in Nell and Pesce and Don Chaka in that scene of seeing Harabel just beaten down while this living hurricane of invaders came to Hueco Mundo. It's crazy. I absolutely loved Ichigo leaping at the chance to help the Arrancars after hearing about all of this. There wasn't any hesitation from him at all, and it's true that they were his enemies, but Nell is proof that they're not all bad, and I love that he's willing to put himself on the line to try to help them, even though a lot of the residents of Hueco Mundo probably tried to kill him at one point, or would kill him if they had the chance. But that's what makes Ichigo like the big hero of the story. He's willing to do things like that to protect the people he cares about, even if it's people like just Nell or Don Chaka. He's willing to do that. That's why he's great. That's why we're rooting for him. And he gets, most of the gang on board. You got Chad and Orihime, but Uryu decides not to go, and him not wanting to help at all makes sense given how he was raised to view hollows. Is it harsh considering you have 2 refugees in the room when he says that he's not gonna go help? Yeah, a little. But it makes sense. What concerns me more from a narrative perspective is if I follow my thoughts about Uryu eventually turning on them. Him being isolated will probably make him more vulnerable to being turned. It's like Obi-Wan being sent off to Utapau while Anakin is left behind and at the mercy of Palpatine manipulating him. It'll be easier to get Uryu to, fully embrace his Quincy brethren if his friends that he kind of disobeys Quincy rules for are gone. If he's not able to talk to them, if he's not able to see them, someone like his dad or maybe one of these Vandenreich people could get a better hold on him if none of his real friends are around. So I'm a little nervous about that. Like I said, I'm like 80% sure that he's gonna turn, especially with the conversations they've been having and now him not going to help the Hollows. And when we do return to Hueco Mundo, thanks to Urahara, I immediately realized how much I missed this place. Back when we were first introduced to it, I talked about how perfect it was conceptually as the Hollow homeland, and there was something really beautiful and fitting about it. I liked how it expanded the Bleach universe. I liked its very specific aesthetics. I was just a big fan, so I'm glad to be back. But it's been through a few changes. For one thing, it's been utterly decimated. Its residents are either dead in the sand or have been shackled in chains by the invading Vandenreich forces. It's a pretty sad sight for me to see the extent of the war-torn place. I do think it might have been cool to show some regular Hollow corpses too, alongside the Arrancars, but that's just me. I think it just would have been a cool visual if there were just massive Hollow corpses laying around, That would have been cool. Maybe we still will. Maybe we just haven't seen that part of Hueco Mundo. Maybe this was just an Arrancar village or something. But we do get to see some of the invading forces, and obviously the allusions to the Third Reich when it comes to the Vandenreich is pretty clear for a variety of reasons, from their uniforms to the name, to the rounding up and extermination of a particular group as the invaders are occupying a foreign space. So it's all very much there, which honestly makes these enemies very easy for me to hate, especially in this case because I'm such a big Hollow fan, so I'm taking this extra personally. But given how the Quincy culture views Hollows, which we've seen through Uryu and through what we already know about Quincy culture, this wide-scale targeting of Hollows and their homeland isn't exactly surprising, but it doesn't make it any less horrifying. It's got this genocidal, cleansing feeling, which is frankly one of the scariest things in the world, and I'm not even speaking from my sheer love of Hollows, because yes, many of them are ravenous monsters in their own right, but when it comes down to it, these were human souls, and they are being utterly exterminated in a systematic, rapid succession. So it's very scary, but one of the other scariest parts to me is the callousness and the thoroughness that this is being carried out with. There's a moment when our heroes first arrive in Hueco Mundo, when they're being loud, and it probably should be enough to get the Quincy's to turn around and check out, but the Quincy's are so certain that they killed everyone in that area that they don't even bother going to see what the commotion might be, because they're just that convinced that it couldn't be possible that anyone is still alive. That really struck me, because at first it's like, wow, these guys aren't even gonna go bother investigating, but then it quickly dawned on me how terrifying their certainty is. As far as they're aware, they couldn't have left any survivors, and if not for our protagonists arriving from the outside, they would be correct. They slaughtered everyone they left behind and took the rest as prisoners. And this is how the Quincy's are handling this conquest of Hueco Mundo strategically. They're laying claim to the territory, killing most of the residents, and then, maybe most interestingly, recruiting a small portion of survivors to fight for them. And this explains Eburn from the first few chapters, where now it's confirmed that he was an Arrancar after all, and he had been recruited by the Quincy's, though I'm interested to know how he fought like a Quincy. Was he just taught how to harness reishi like they do? I don't know. It's a little surprising that the Quincy's would recruit Hollows into their ranks, but they do seem to treat them as disposable pawns that are discarded without a second thought. And it's kind of a humiliation tactic even, of like subjugating the Hollows into servitude. And speaking of this, we learn that Dondo Chaco of the Great Desert Bros has been captured and might have been recruited, and I had to remember that he and Pesce are actually stronger than they seem. It's easy to forget that, since they were mostly jokey characters, but they were Neliel's direct underlings when she was in Espada. But the image of Dondo Chaca dressed up like a Quincy, like Eburn was, came to mind and made me laugh. I hope we see that, but mostly I hope he's okay. The most disturbing showcase that the Quincy's put on here as the new antagonists is their treatment of their prisoners, particularly by this new bad guy, Kyilge Opie, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. It could be Quilge, it could be Kilg, but it seems like Kyilge to me, or Quilge. I'm going with Kyilge, but this man, wow, what a first impression he makes as a character. He is just utterly despicable and seems to relish the slaughtering of Arrancars with no empathy or hesitation whatsoever. I think it's the casualness of his callousness that's the most unsettling thing to me, and the anime really enhanced this. His tone of voice is just so nonchalant and straight up kooky as he's enjoying holding so much power over his beaten enemies and dictating every second of their final moments. And despite orders to take in some Arrancars as recruits, he seems hell-bent on killing every last one of his prisoners, which even his soldiers take note of. It's only when he sees people with a little bit of a fight in them that he bothers to even offer them a chance to be taken in as recruits. So I don't know if he just respects their gumption more than he respects those that submit, but the whole thing with him lining them up and having them at his mercy while he kills them one by one, like for no reasons, was just so messed up and was giving me flashbacks to Negan's introduction in Walking Dead, with the relish he seemed to take in eliminating helpless prisoners. Speaking of which, I cosplayed as Negan once. I still have my beautiful Lucille. Kyuuge is a great villain right off the bat, and I think a really effective kind of herald for who these new enemies could be. Like, it's mostly on him to make the biggest first impression as to what to expect, because Eburn turned out to not really be a Quincy and not really be a character and was beaten pretty easily, and the guy that visited Yamamoto, Ludus, he didn't exactly stick around or leave much of an impression. Besides the little glimpses we've gotten of the Quincy King, Kyuuge Opie seems to be the real introduction of what we might expect from these foes. In line with my thoughts on Uryu, who initially seemed completely devoted to the Quincy philosophies and beliefs but then became an ally to a Soul Reaper, Kyuuge so far seems to be a much more devout example of what a Quincy is supposed to be. It's like the most extreme version of what Uryu initially seemed to be, or might have become if he didn't bond with Ichigo. I don't want to say that Uryu isn't a real Quincy, because he obviously is, but he's mostly been isolated from that culture. His grandpa taught him, and his dad hid his own connection for years, but he was never like leading Quincy armies, or around people of that culture in large numbers. Kyuuge feels like a more traditional or fundamentalist Quincy, if that makes sense. And considering his very clear influences, he probably would consider himself to be more pure than someone like Uryu. The sheer fact that Uryu would have ever helped a Soul Reaper, to me feels like Kyuuge wouldn't respect that. He would look down upon those decisions, kind of like a more extreme version of what we've seen from Uryu's dad. Besides his place in the narrative and what his presence might hint toward what to expect from the other Quincies, Kyuuge Opie already stands out in my mind among the overall antagonists of Bleach. Sure, he may turn out like Eburn and not last long, but it's his cavalier cruelty that stands out to me. He's not the first Bleach bad guy that enjoys killing and making people suffer, considering we've had characters like Neutra. However, Neutra's butchering came from all of his insecurities, but I don't get that impression from Kyuuge at all. It's just sport, it's just fun, and it's just him looking down on those he believes are inferior. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's got some tragic backstory that brought him to this point, but so far he seems to love being this way for the sake of his own amusement. He loves what he does, and with the things his character obviously alludes to that I was discussing before, the dark joy he has in performing his duty reminds me of Hans Landa from the movie Inglourious Basterds. Just a deliciously despicable villain that hopefully will get a severe beatdown. I think that's why we're really showing how awful he is. Like, Kubo's making sure that he really gets the audience like me to want to see Kyuuge get pummeled in the end. When I need to see this guy get really badly beaten. Seeing the Quincies in this way, as a genocidal army, is interesting because of how it kind of might end up recontextualizing what I've thought about the Quincy throughout this whole story. We've always known that there was some real bad blood between the Soul Reapers and the Quincies that led to the Quincies nearly being wiped out, but I've always seen the Quincy in a sympathetic light because of that, as victims of the corrupt Soul Society, but maybe it really was much more complicated than that. Were the Quincies always like this? Or is this just this particular sect with the Vondenreich? We know their mass slaughter of hollows is disrupting the natural order, so are they just continuing the things that they threatened the universe with back then? I guess I'm wondering, was this what they were like back during those conflicts, or is this a response to what happened to their people? Have they become like the ones that slaughtered them before? That can happen. It's like the X-Men comics sometimes when Magneto goes too far and almost starts becoming similar to the ones that traumatized him as a child. Things of that nature. I don't know, but I'm so curious to learn more about the Quincy history and what exactly happened and where these people have been. Not every Arrancars is just willing to go down without a fight though, as they're getting tormented and butchered. Surprisingly, Lolly and Menely try to resist, Aizen's assistants, groupies, paramours, whatever they are. I can't say I was super thrilled to see them. I barely talked about them when I was going through the Arrancars arc because there wasn't much to say. They were just really unpleasant, envious, violent, and horrible to Orihime. And that was kind of it. So I kind of hated them. Like, they would probably be my least favorite Arrancars if Loopy didn't exist, you know? Yes, Loopy still sucks. Still, I gotta give them respect where it's due that they tried to fight back even if they failed spectacularly. But then we got to see a few more familiar denizens of Hueco Mundo, and I was much happier to see them than I was Lolly and Meneli, because these three are much more enjoyable and were actually fun to see fight during the Arrancars arc, and given what's happening to Harabel, it's fitting that we get to see them really try to bring down the invaders and save the woman that they respect so much. However, despite Nell really trying to glaze them by saying like, oh my god, Ichigo, these three are super strong, it seemed obvious that it was just a way to reestablish their strength so their defeat would hype up Kyuuge more when he, of course, handily beats them. I was thinking that as Nell was talking, and sure enough, they get beaten without much of a fuss. They don't even seem to have a chance to cut off their arms and unleash Ion again. Like, can they even still do that, or was Ion so terribly destroyed by Yamamoto that that's just off the table now? I don't know, but yeah, they get beaten pretty badly and pretty quickly. And they really do remind me a little of the Sand Snakes from Game of Thrones, except easily much better written characters. Like, don't get me wrong, they are much better characters than the Sand Snakes were. Do you know what I mean? Do you see the vision? 3 female warriors who serve a matriarch figure bickering amongst themselves and get handily beaten by an absolute psychopath. It just came to mind, so I thought I'd mention it. I mean no offense to these 3, I like them so much more than the Sand Snakes. Anyway, it's now gonna be Ichigo against Kyuuge, and I think this will be an interesting fight, to say the least. A quick little add-on, I've just gotta say, I would have loved to see Ashido show up during this occupation of Hueco Mundo. And yes, I know, he wasn't in the manga. I did a whole video about how I accidentally watched those few filler episodes back then, but I really enjoyed them, and I loved his character, and I know that he's not canon to the manga, but if the anime adaptation included him even, that would have been so fun. Considering the whole crux of his character is that he's trapped in Hueco Mundo, I would have loved an appearance, or even a little cameo, like, I don't know, Hollows running into the forest and Ashido trying to fend off some Quincy or something. Then again, maybe he'd be trying to help them wipe out the Hollows, because that's kind of what he was doing here, trying to make a difference, but whatever the case, I think it would have been pretty fun. Even if it was just an anime-only thing. That was part of the anime, this is part of the anime, let's just throw in a little anime canon thing. All in all, I'm loving how this is developing, and it already feels so massive. The Vandenreich are intimidating and seem like worthy final enemies, but I hope they don't kill every last one of my Hollow babies. But I'm so excited to see what happens next. According to our big bad, the conquest of Hueco Mundo is just a stepping stone toward going after Soul Society, so I'm curious how much action we're actually going to see in the Hollow homeland. At least this fight, I imagine, between Ichigo and Kyuuge. And I really appreciate that Ichigo is trying to save the Hollows, but there isn't much left to save, so we'll see. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I really appreciate it, like always. If you want to see more of this journey and the immediate thoughts that lead to these analysis videos, you can see my manga read-along and my anime episode reactions on my Patreon. I'll see you all soon, where hopefully Ichigo will save my Hollows from extinction. I hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye.